Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Leicester City but bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Luka Milivojevic, Martin Kelly and James McArthur after the game. So let's begin. A sensational strike by Luka Milivojevic seals successive home wins for Palace for the first time this season, as Roy Hodgson's team claimed victory against Leicester City with a dogged display. The Eagles skipper fired in from long range 6 minutes before the break to ultimately hand his team the crucial 3 points. However, Premier League debutant Vicente Guaita would also play a crucial role in securing the win when he produced an excellent reaction save to deny James Vardy from netting what seemed to be a surefire equaliser. An encounter where defensive determination reigned supreme for both teams and the goal-scoring opportunities were at a premium. The win also marked the first time the Eagles had won without Wilfried Zaha since September 2016 due to the Ivorian suspension. Making his first league start due to Wayne Hennessey's back injury, Guaita remained untroubled for the first 28 minutes as both teams struggled to create anything in the wet conditions. However, the Spanish shot-stopper was given a scare when he miscontrolled a back pass and Jamie Vardy pounced on it to win the ball and pop it into the unguarded net. However, the Foxes striker was penalised for a foul on the relieved goalkeeper. Guaita was called into more routine action to stop the former England attacker's header soon after, but on 39 minutes the Eagles finally managed to spark the game and the crowd out of their slumber when a wonder strike handed them the lead. Some patient build-up play involving Andros Townsend and Aaron Wan-Bissaka on the edge of the box couldn't manipulate a breakthrough, so when the ball came to Milivojevic in oceans of space, the captain decided to try his luck from 30 yards, and produced a brilliant attempt that arced away from Kasper Schmeichel's dive and nested into the net to register his fourth of the campaign in style. That helped to lift the encounter out of its slumber, and not long after a Max Meyer shot skidded along the damp turf just past the upright as Hodgson's team ended an even half on top. City showed a bit more threat at the start of the second 45, and after Demarai Gray sliced high and wide, he embarked on a run from the halfway line to the Eagles' box, where he was held up by Mamadou Sakho but still managed to scuff the ball off target. But Palace could have netted a second when Jordan Ives saw a shot blocked by a sea of Leicester legs on a counter-attack. Just as the one-goal lead had been against Burnley a fortnight earlier, there was a nervy atmosphere around Sellers as Palace looked to maintain a slim advantage, and hearts were in mouths when a well-placed Gazigol fired wide when he was picked out of the back post by Gray. But with 11 minutes to go, Guaita kept his team in front with a superb save. A neat passing move saw Gazigol find Kelechi Iheanacho on the edge of the box, who nudged the ball into Vardy's path, and the hitman stabbed towards the bottom corner, but the Eagles keeper showed marvellous reactions to get down low and tip the effort onto the post, and received a slice of luck that his stop deserved when the rebound trickled back into his thankful grasp. With the lead in their grasp, Palace retreated in the final stages to try and keep Leicester at bay, and Wilfred Ndidi blazed over the top during some more late pressure. But the Eagles held firm to record their third straight win over the Foxes and kick off their festive fixture list in perfect fashion. It was a vital win for Crystal Palace as they defeated Leicester City 1-0 at Sellers Park on Saturday. The Eagles ended their unwanted record of not winning without Wilfried Zaha in the Premier League as a superb Luka Milivojevic strike settled a poor contest at Sellers Park. But while there weren't too many chances in the game, there were plenty of talking points. Here are some of them. The curse is broken. Before the game, Roy Hodgson spoke about how this was another opportunity for Palace to lift the curse of not winning games without Wilfried Zaha in the side. That was a record that stretched back 13 Premier League games to September 2016, but finally that had now been broken at the 14th attempt. It was a relief fine tonic for Palace going into a difficult test against Manchester City next weekend, and was earned through a gutsy and gritty effort in difficult conditions. Guaita's dramatic debut. It was a Premier League debut to remember for Vicente Guaita as he kept a clean sheet in his first taste of English top-flight football. But it could have been a very different story, with the Spaniard relieved to hear Michael Oliver's whistle in the first half as Jamie Vardy was penalised for a foul on him. When the England striker Guaita's dramatic debut. It was a Premier League debut to remember for Guaita's dramatic debut. It was a Premier League debut to remember for Vicente Guaita as he kept a clean sheet in his first taste of English top-flight football. But it could have been a very different story, with the Spaniard relieved to hear Michael Oliver's whistle in the first half as Jamie Vardy was penalised for a foul on him, when the England striker dispossessed Guaita in the Palace penalty box. Many Leicester fans were upset at the decision, but it looked to be the correct call, much to Guaita's relief as Vardy tapped the ball into the empty net. But Guaita showed why Palace signed him, with a couple of fine saves to deny Vardy, firstly from a header in the first half, before tipping the striker's close-range effort onto the post in the second half, with the Spaniard once again relieved as the ball rebounded into his arms off the post to help preserve his clean sheet. McArthur's yellow card. When James McArthur went down just outside the box in first half injury time under a challenge from Ricardo Pereira, the Palace man wanted a free kick. What he got was a yellow card for diving from referee Michael Oliver. The replay seemed to suggest that there was some contact, but Oliver deemed it to be a dive and booked the Palace man, much to his dismay. But the Scottish midfielder did not let that deter him as he put in a fine effort, playing in different roles across the midfield during the game, due to a reshuffle after Checo Chiarte went off with a knock. Captain Fantastic. Not for the first time, Milivojevic produced a match-winning moment. He has often been the man on the spot for Palace from penalties, but this time, like he did against Southampton in similar conditions back in January, he notched a winner with a strike from just outside the box, Palace's only shot on target in the game. And it was a strike worthy of winning any match, with the Serbian's moment of magic the real highlight from a poor game, as he beat Kasper Schmeichel from distance with an arcing shot into the bottom corner. Jordan Ayew. Not for the first time this season, the Swansea City loanee was ineffective for Palace. He tried hard up top, but once again lacked any real quality as he barely offered any goal threat for the Eagles. He's yet to score a goal, and he spurned a good chance when the ball was cut back to him by Andros Townsend. Ayew was withdrawn within the final quarter of the game for Alexander Sorov, and it would be a surprise to see him retain his place when Wilfried Zaha returns from suspension next week. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. And also, if you are on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place for you to join in with discussions and also share your opinions with other fans. And if you are someone like myself who often likes to go onto forums, not only to post your own opinion, but also to read what other fans, have to say, whether that be about transfers, whether that be about players' performances, or even just matches in general, then of course do head over to the Facebook group because, like I've said, much like a forum, it is a great place to connect with and obviously share your opinion with other fans. Now, another great page that you should follow is our Twitter page, so if you do want to follow us, obviously search for us at Crystal Palace, and that obviously gives you another Palace page to follow, but mainly if you are someone who wants to keep up to date with all the latest Palace news, then of course do give us a follow on there, because we do regularly update it with the latest news articles, latest player interviews and all things like that. And if you are someone who, once again, wants another Palace account to follow, just to get sort of another opinion, whether that be about the game, whether that be about the starting lineup, and whether that just be about anything really regarding the club, then of course do give us a follow on there as well, because we do regularly update it with the few of us who run the page. So basically, if you want to get a different view, let's say, and a different perspective of Palace, then of course do feel free to follow us on our Twitter page. Now, another great place for you to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments, so if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings where you rate the players' performances from 1 to 10, with of course 10 being the best. And one of the main reasons for that is, of course, you come to the podcast to listen to my opinion, but rather than, you guys just listening to mine, feel free to share your general views of the game itself and obviously the players' performances. And that's basically so that rather than me just having my opinion, which of course I'm sharing with you, I can also read the comment section and basically see how you guys thought the players performed. And even if you don't want to do your player ratings, just comment below with just general views of the game. And whether you're a Leicester City fan or whether you're a Palace fan, do comment below with your player ratings or just your general views of the game, mainly just so that I can come back to the video, and rather than just having my opinion and my sort of view of the game, I can obviously read the comment section and basically get a more sort of broader view of the game. And also, if you have got any questions that you want to ask me, whether that be about my player ratings or whether it's just about anything really to be about Palace, then of course I will reply to all of your messages. So of course, if you are someone who wants to ask me a question, don't hesitate, and of course you can do that in the comment section. So if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned or join the Facebook group, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to the player ratings, starting and goal with Vicente Guaita, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, in terms of Guaita's performance, before I go on to talk about it, I might as well talk about the fact that this was his first Premier League start for Palace, and the fact that he kept a clean sheet firstly on his debut in a new league is obviously, great as well. So of course we're going to give him a bit of credit for that. But moving aside from his performance, the fact that Wayne Hennessey got injured in the week and didn't really train all week obviously put Guaita under quite a lot of pressure, because as Roy Hodgson said, at the last minute he sort of had to be thrown in there. And the fact that he reacted so well, given the fact that he still got slight language barriers, the fact that he performed so well with it being his debut, with him coming in at the last minute, and just the fact that he'd never played you know, in such a sort of important game before. You know, obviously he's played games in Spain, but when you consider, you know, we've got Man City next week, you know, we had to get something against Leicester. So when you consider the magnitude of that, the fact that he performed so well was, of course, really impressive. Now, of course, you know, most players who come to the Premier League, you know, they often have a shaky start, mainly because, you know, they're not necessarily used to the physicality of the league. So before I go on to talk about the positives of his performance, I might as well talk about a chance which was a bit shaky, and certainly me watching in the Holmesdale Upper, it was a bit worrying seeing that Jamie Vardy got the ball back in the back of the net. Now, of course, we were obviously grateful as fans, and obviously Guaita himself, and the fact that the referee blew for a foul. Obviously Vardy, you know, but basically barging into Guaita, and you know, on another day that probably would just shown physicality and the goal would have still been given. But obviously that just goes to show that even though it was his first Premier League start, and even though he was confident throughout the majority of the game, he just showed a little moment there where a back pass has come to him, quite a simple one, and he just took too long on the ball, tried to dribble it past Jamie Vardy. Vardy's obviously caught up with him, barged into him, got the ball off him, and of course pushed him over in the process and put the ball in the back of the net. So in that situation, I'm thinking, yes, he's very good at playing the ball out from the back, but he just needs to be a little bit more careful, especially when it's wet like that, just to make sure that he doesn't spend too much time on the ball, but also to make sure that he actually makes his clearances quick enough so he isn't put in a situation where the opponent's strikers or whoever finds themselves in an attacking position, so that he needs to make sure that they obviously can't get on the ball. But aside from that, where obviously, you know, Michael Oliver gave the foul, aside from that, his performance was very good, and that's why I've given him a 7. And certainly if he hadn't have made that little error, you know, with Jamie Vardy and the fact that he got dispossessed quite easily, albeit through a foul, if you put that aside, he's probably looking at 8 overall for his performance. And when you consider, you know, like I've said, it's his Premier League debut, the fact that he came in last minute to replace Wayne Hennessey, and like I've said already, you know, the importance of the wing considering we've got Man City coming up, you know, all of that sort of playing up against him, let's say, the fact that he dealt with it so well and came out the other side with such a good performance was of course great to see. Now, in terms of talking about his good parts of the game, obviously I think he wasn't really tested as much as Leicester would have liked. You know, yes, he made a few sort of catches and a few blocks and things like that, so that's obviously great to see. But there were 2 saves in particular which I really want to mention, which really do stand out for me. Now, the first one was obviously from Jamie Vardy in the first half. Vardy got the ball inside the box, had a shot at Guaita, and obviously Guaita got down low. Lovely dive to actually claim the ball. So not only was he showing, you know, in terms of his ability playing the ball out from the back, but actually he was also backing that up with the fact that he was very good in terms of his mobility and the fact that he was able to get across his line and make that particular save from Jamie Vardy in the first half. And obviously he followed that up in the second half with an even better save, which is probably like 10 times better than that in the second half, and that was obviously where Vardy's through on goal, great ball by Iheanacho, you know, in between our 2 defenders. Vardy's got on the end of it, literally toe poked it almost past Guaita. Guaita manages just to get the slightest of touches to push the ball obviously onto the post, and of course he was able to once again get up and dive on the ball and claim it. So not only was that impressive in the fact that he was able to get that touch on it in the first place, but the fact that he also had the reactions to actually get up quick enough to actually go and get the rebound as well, to stop Jamie Vardy from, you know, literally tapping it in from 1 yard out. That was the thing that was really impressive for me. Now, people may say, and I've seen quite a few people saying that actually the fact that it came off the post isn't really a good save because Guaita didn't necessarily catch the ball or deflect it out. But like I've said, if he hadn't have got that little touch on it, it would have gone in at the far post. So the fact that Guaita actually got that little touch just to push it onto the post and into a position where it rebounded so he could catch it, that was the thing that was really impressive for me. And you know, when you consider, I think that was in the last sort of 10 minutes or so, when you consider, you know, Leicester were putting on the pressure, trying to get an equaliser in the game, that really just goes to show how important that save was, because if that had gone in, would have been 1-1. Obviously, even though it wasn't the greatest game, it was a bit dull, we'd probably be quite disappointed and thinking 2 points dropped. But the fact that he made that crucial save at the end of the game was of course great to see. Now, of course, just, you know, sort of an overall summary of Vicente's performance. The word I used was confident, because I think he was exactly that. You know, you'd think that sometimes players, especially goalkeepers, might take them a bit of time to sort of acclimatise to the league, to a new league, and especially the Premier League, where it's a lot more physical than the Liga. But the fact that he came in, looked so confident, and like I've said, considering he was thrown in the deep end by replacing Wayne Hennessey sort of last minute, the fact that he'd done that and just made loads of good saves and loads of good catches, especially that one which was a match-winning save from Jamie Vardy, that was of course what was really quite impressive as well. Now, obviously, Wayne Hennessey, you know, if he's recovered from his injury, there's obviously going to be a debate as to whether he will start against Man City. But when you consider Guaita came in for one game, albeit his 4th game for Palace, but first in the Premier League. The fact that he came in and performed so well really says to me that you can't really drop him for Wayne Hennessey, because Wayne Hennessey hasn't done anything wrong, but when you have a player who comes in to replace someone and performs so well, he doesn't really deserve to lose his place. So of course there's going to be a debate, you know, certainly later on in the week if Hennessey has recovered as to who will start. But for me, the fact that, you know, Guaita performed so well and Hennessey has been performing relatively well and consistently this season, once again shows that we've actually got, for once, good competition in the goalkeeping department. You know, the fact that we've got a goalkeeper in Hennessey who's played them all of the season and performed very consistently, and the fact that we've got Guaita who not only is as good but can come in and actually perform as well as Hennessey had done this season, that was of course great to see. So once again it shows that we've got good options and, you know, 2 competent goalkeepers who can come in and do a job. So it will certainly be good for competition, obviously, to have them playing, both of them playing so well, but actually it'll be interesting to see who, when they battle against each other to get that that first team goalkeeping place, it'd be really interesting to see who wins the battle between Hennessey and Guaita. But for me personally, I still think because the fact that Guaita was a little bit shaky, you know, especially that time he got dispossessed by Vardy, I still think maybe give him a few more games to settle into it. But I do certainly think if Hennessey's back for Man City, I think it's sort of going to be 50-50 for Hodgson whether who he goes with. And me personally, considering we need to sort of counter-attack City, I would go with Guaita, just because his distribution is a bit better. But obviously we'll see sort of at the end of this week as to who is available for that game, obviously against City, and obviously whether Hennessey is back for that game as well. Now obviously normally I'll go on and move on to the second player obviously in the lineup after the goalkeeper, but what I'm going to do now, I'm going to give you Guaita's interview after the game from eagles.cpc.co.uk. Now I'm sure you will enjoy it, and you know, obviously his English isn't great, but it is a really good interview because he really is trying just to get his message across of how important this game was, and you'll hear that word quite a lot in the podcast. And really just goes to show that even though he's been on the bench for this time, the fact that he's just been determined just to go on and just sort of grind out till he gets his chance, and the fact that he took his chance, he's obviously really happy with that. So what I'm going to do before I move on to the right back Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I'm going to give you Vicente Guaita's first interview after a game at Palace.
Vicente, congratulations on your first game, and I know you're still learning English, but what do you think about the game today?
It's important, no? For me, the play football, and the help in the group, no, is important. Today is win, is happy. All players is happy. All mates very happy. 3 more points. First game is happy.
And the goal from Luka, it was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good. It's difficult. Luka is good, good midfielder. Good today is good shoot. Goal is important, no, for Eagles. Important the 3 points more, 3 more points. Now is the mentality in the next 2 games.
And for you, a very good save. How happy were you when the ball hit the post and came back?
Happy because is the save is important. The clinching, no, the clinching, important. Important the work in the season, no, is important. Important my mates Hennessey and Speroni, the good work. Is important the training and Dino is better, no? Better Hennessey, better Speroni, better Vicente.
And finally, how was the weather? How was the weather?
The weather is today is very, very cold, no? Is England, but in England is sunny, is important. But today is an important win. The Eagles is win. Now happy.
So now you've heard Vicente Guaita's first interview after a game at Palace, which I'm sure you did enjoy. We're going to carry on with the player ratings with the right back Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who I'm going to give a 7 overall for his performance. Now, before I go on to talk about his overall performance, I've got to say, you know, like I do every week in terms of picking out certain players from the position that other players in our team have to defend against, and obviously they have to man mark them. Obviously in this game here, James Maddison and Demarai Gray were the primary players that obviously Aaron Wan-Bissaka had to deal with, and the fact that I've given him a 7 really does reflect of how well he obviously dealt with them. And you know, when you consider James Maddison, who I've actually got in my fantasy team, when you consider he's performed really well for Leicester this season, he's been one of their best players, the fact that he got taken off, I believe it was at half time, really just goes to show how well Wan-Bissaka did, in particular up against him, in the fact that he was performing so under par that the manager had to take him off. So that once again goes to show that how one of their best players was really quite restricted in the game because of how well some of our players did perform. Now, of course, like I've said already, you know, James Maddison and Demarai Gray have done really well this season, and certainly they're difficult players to go up against. Now, of course, Maddison necessarily hasn't got the pace, but he's got the technical ability, and of course, Demarai Gray has got the pace. So you've got two players here with great attributes, which of course could make it difficult for a defender, you know, make life very difficult. But the fact that Wan-Bissaka, you know, even though he's really young, and I say this every week, but the fact that he's so inexperienced but still performs so well up against quality opposition week in, week out, really just goes to show how much of a talent he is. Now, like I've said already, you know, the main well he dealt with them, and the fact that he also went forward on a few occasions to support the attack was great to see as well. Now, like I've said this in weeks gone by, in the fact that Wan-Bissaka's defending is, you know, almost always a 7 or 8 out of 10, so I can't really fault him there. But it's his attacking play which really was lacking at the beginning of the season. But as we've seen in the last sort of month, or even 2 months, let's say, the fact that he's now starting to go forward and not only getting the ball forward, but the fact that he's now supporting the attack by trying to put crosses in, trying to, you know, do 1-2s with players. The fact that he's now doing that and he's still keeping up the high level of his defensive work whilst also giving an output offensively, the fact that he's doing that really is quite impressive. Now, obviously, you know, like I've said, James Maddison and Demarai Gray are really hard players to play up against, so the fact that he was still able to deal with them defensively whilst also, you know, proving a really useful outlet to actually support the attack, that was another thing which really did impress me. Now, in terms of a word to use for his performance, I'd probably use the word awesome, because I do think that really just does really epitomise his display, because he may not have been absolutely fantastic and won every single challenge and absolutely stopped every single Leicester attack and every single Leicester ball into the box, but the fact that he just put in an overall good display both defensively and offensively was obviously really great to see. Now, there's one moment in particular which I really want to pinpoint, and that was in the first half where Maddison's obviously on the foray forward, and Wan-Bissaka's managed to get the ball off of him really effectively and obviously able to regain possession. Now, the reason I picked that out is just that sheer quality of the fact that he was able to nick the ball off him. That was just absolutely class. Now, not many players can do it as well as Wan-Bissaka, and of course we've seen him make loads of sliding tackles, but I do really want to pick this one out in particular because I do think it was really good. You know, the fact that he managed to, you know, get into that position, get back to Maddison and still make that challenge to nick the ball off of him, that was something that really did impress me. So even though as a whole he dealt with Maddison and Demarai Gray so well, I just wanted to pick out that moment in particular because I do think that was just a little bit more extra class in that performance. But once again, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, a good performance from him, and certainly, you know, given that he had such a good defensive output, obviously deserved to get a clean sheet. And you know, like I've said, and like I've really failed to think of any words and adjectives to really describe him anymore because his performance just continued to impress me. But once again, another impressive performance from the young right back Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who I'm going to give a 7. So I'm going to move on now to the first of our two centre backs, and that is of course Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, before I go on to talk about his performance, which of course was really impressive, I might as well go back to what I sort of touched upon at the end of last week's podcast, in the fact that James Tompkins got suspended after the game. Obviously, within the game he didn't get a yellow card, but in the tunnel after the game, sort of confronting the referee, he got his yellow card, which of course was his 5th of the season. So that ultimately meant that he was suspended for this game, and obviously it's quite obvious now, Martin Kelly, he's such a reliable, or has been in the past, such a reliable player for us, so obvious we were obviously putting him in our team, and rightly so, because I do think he's obviously a very competent player to call upon. Now, the thing that I was really impressed with is not only did he make up for the fact that Tompkins wasn't there, but he put in a performance which was even better than, you know, Tompkins has been playing recently. And the fact that he'd done that, well, once again showed his class. Now, obviously we know we can always call upon Kelly because when he's played at centre-back we've seen how good he is, but the fact that he came into the side and not only just performed, you know, to your standard level and just sort of seed the game out basically, or saw the game out just to make up the numbers, the fact that he came in and made a difference to our defence by just being that rock at the back, that was the thing that really did impress me and really did cement to me really and made it quite clear that he is such a good squad player. You know, the fact that he can play so well like this when called upon, really does goes to lengths really to show how good he is. Now, obviously, I talked about Wan-Bissaka, having to deal with Maddison and Gray. Well, Martin Kelly wasn't really given an easy task because he was obviously up against Jamie Vardy. Now, the fact that Jamie Vardy didn't have too many opportunities in the game, and the opportunities he did have, they were well saved by Guaita, really just goes to show how well the defence did, and in particular Martin Kelly did in obviously really restricting his chances. Now, the thing I really liked about his performance, especially up against Jamie Vardy, is just the sheer amount of important challenges he made, and the fact that he obviously put in the shift just to help us protect that clean sheet, considering it was obviously quite a narrow lead leading at 1-0, especially going into that second half. So the fact that he not only dealt with Jamie Vardy well, but his overall defensive play was brilliant, in the fact that he was making loads of challenges, putting in a shift to keep a clean sheet, whilst also winning quite a lot of headers in the air. Albeit not all of his clearances were great, and quite often they went to Leicester City players, but the fact that he had that determination and that grit just to clear the ball at every opportunity, rather than sort of trying to play it out from the back and putting our defence under pressure. The fact that he was done that, and the fact that he was also calm and composed when doing that, that was another thing that really did impress me. But once again, just going back to the point that he, is a he came in as a replacement, obviously, for James Tompkins, who was suspended. But once again, with his performance here, and the 8 I've given him, really is just the fact that he proved such an able replacement as defensive cover. So the fact that he was able to come into the side and perform as well as he did, was really the thing that was really quite impressive. Now, in terms of that sort of partnership, or that sort of battle between him and Jamie Vardy, the fact that Martin Kelly won almost everything in the air and in the box as well really just goes real lengths to show how good he was in the game. And then, like I've said already, Vardy was probably one of Leicester's better players in the fact that he had most of their chances for on goal, but the fact that Martin Kelly done such a great job in keeping him out of the game is obviously one of the reasons I've given him an 8 overall. Now, in terms of Martin Kelly's performances as a whole, he's played for Palace, he's played quite a few games now for Palace, primarily playing as a fullback, but in the last sort of 2 years or so, we started to see him play at centre-back. And I've got to say, and I think there might be a few people who agree with me, but this has got to be up there with one of the best performances I've seen from Kelly play. Now, of course, we could look back to like the Liverpool game a few seasons ago. We can even look back to the Tottenham game in the FA Cup, where he obviously scored the only goal of the game. But I certainly do think, in terms of just his sheer defensive work in this game, I do think this game is going to be up there as one of the best he's played, and certainly me having watched live, it's got to be one of the best performances I've seen from him. Actually just seeing his quality in defence, whilst also just being that rock at the back, even though he wasn't, even though he's not normally our first choice centre back, that was of course great to see as well. Now, my final point really, and this is sort of aside from the performance, isn't really linked to it, but I'm actually quite pleased for him. The fact that he always gives everything, always seems to do well when he comes into the side, it really was quite pleasing to actually see him come into the side after not necessarily having too many chances this season, and the fact that he performed so well really is quite pleasing. And once again, it just goes back to the point that he's such a fantastic player, and that's just because he always plays well, whether he's starting, whether he's coming off the bench, and the fact that even though he may not play week in, week out, when he's called upon, the fact that he performs so well is the thing that really did impress me. And that's really the point I really want to finish on, is the fact that the main reason I've given him an 8 is, yes, his defensive performance was good, but the fact that he could always the fact that he's that fantastic squad player who can just come into the side when called upon, and even though he hasn't been in the side for long periods of time, the fact that he still performs to a high standard was the thing that really did impress me. So Martin Kelly, overall, fantastic defensive performance from him, and certainly made a big contribution to us keeping a clean sheet. So I do think he does deserve the 8 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to our second centre-back, Mamadou Sakho, who I'm going to give a 6 overall for his performance. Now, in terms of Sakho's performance, he's been one of these players who's been fairly consistent this season, but in the last sort of few games or so, his standards have sort of dropped a bit, especially, you're looking at the Brighton and West Ham game. So the fact that he came into this game here against Leicester City and put in such a good performance, and hence why I've given him a 6, that was of course great to see early on. Now, in terms of his contribution in the first half, and especially quite early on into that half, is the fact that he saw quite a lot of time on the ball. Now, one of the main reasons for that, me particularly looking back at the game, was mainly just because both teams weren't really attacking that much, so we needed to sort of play the ball out from the back to try and just break down, Leicester City, sort of not necessarily their back four, but just then break them down in midfield. So of course Sakho had quite a lot of time on the ball because he was obviously trying to play the ball forward and trying to break through in midfield. Now, of course, his main job is to do his defensive work, but the fact that he's got that ability on the ball, especially, when you've just started a game and it's quite difficult to break the opponents down, that was of course great to see. Now, even though he was very good at actually getting on the ball and putting it forward, there were a few times where he missed a few passes, and some of them got cut out by the opposition. So obviously that wasn't great. But luckily for us, not only was his recovery and Kelly's recovery great, but also the fact that nothing came from them. You could count ourselves lucky as well. So even though he was good at playing the ball out from the back, there were a few occasions where, of course, some of his passes were too short or some of them got cut out. So of course that was slightly disappointing, but it's still, the fact that he actually was looking to play the ball forward in the first place, and the fact that he was always looking to be on the ball to actually create chances going forward, that was of course really good to see. Now, in terms of his overall performance, I'd use the word comfortable, because I don't necessarily think, as I said with Kelly, he didn't really have too much hassle, and that's mainly because, like us, Leicester weren't necessarily the greatest in front of goal. So aside from the saves that Guaita had to make, there weren't really too many chances Leicester had which really could have challenged Sacco. So overall, I do think for the most part he was very comfortable in the defence, and that's mainly just because he'd done his shift for the side. And like I said with Kelly, he gave his all for the team and certainly was crucial, let's say, to us keeping the clean sheet after all. Now, one of the things I did like about his performance, and this is something that even when he is playing bad, is something that I'm quite impressed with, is just his sheer physicality and his ability just to bring the ball down. And, the fact that he's got a headering ability as well. Now, obviously, his physicality is important as a defender, but the fact that he always puts it to good use by making it difficult for the opponents, that was, of course, great to see. And the fact that not only was he good at playing the ball out from the back, but the fact that he was able to actually bring the ball down, so the ball's in the air, the fact that he's able to bring it down, control it, and then play the ball out from the back, that was a thing that was really quite impressive for me. Now, the fact that he also combined this sort of physicality and this ability on the ball with the fact that his defensive work, especially his headering, just clearing the danger, the fact that he was able to combine that was really great to see as well. Now, like I've said already, albeit his passing and his ability to play the ball out from the back and the ability just to, when a ball is in the air, the fact that he's able to chest it down and control it, obviously that was great, but there were a few nervous moments, especially sort of towards the end of the game and certainly throughout the second half, where he was a bit nervous when he was dribbling, a few times where he almost lost the ball, but like he always does, he sort of does a Ronaldo chop, or he does some sort of skill to get the ball away from the opponents, and yes, that works, but when it doesn't work, that really could cost us. So yes, it's nice to see, and sometimes it's a bit sort of heart in mouth, but the fact that he almost lost the ball on a few occasions was a little bit disappointing. But that still remains, the fact still remains that the fact that he's looking to play the ball out from the back, the fact that he's looking to dribble, and the fact that he's looking to go forward was of course great to see. And the fact that he actually remained very calm when doing it, especially when he was sort of under pressure from the Leicester City press, that was of course most impressive as well. Now, some people may argue maybe I should give him a 7 overall, but for the few of the negatives that I've already pointed out, the fact that he was a bit nervous when he was dribbling and almost lost the ball on a few occasions, that really brings it down to a 6. And there was one moment in the second half where, yes, it was great to see him dribbling the ball, but he was literally in Leicester's half of the pitch. So yes, it's great to see him having that determination and drive to actually push forward, but on that occasion, if Leicester had nicked the ball off of us and hit us on a counter-attack, he wouldn't be there to defend. So yes, he's good at playing the ball out from the back, but that's one of the reasons I've given him a 6 as opposed to a 7, is the fact that if Leicester had been a little bit more potent on the attack, they could have easily took the ball off of him and countered there. So for him, it's all about getting that balance between playing the ball out from the back and going too far forward and being too adventurous. But overall, once again, a great contribution to earn us the clean sheet, and certainly a good performance from him. And like I've said, much better than performances have been recently. So Mamadou Sakho here, playing in defence, I'm going to give him a 6. So I'm going to move on now to the final player in our defence, and that is of course the left back Patrick Vernano, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, I said last weekend in the fact that he came off, quite early on into the second half, that there was obviously going to be doubts as to whether he would start the game, and luckily, given the fact that he had a week's recovery, he obviously recovered from that shoulder problem, and of course he started in the game. And to be honest, he's one of these players who doesn't really get injured that much, so it wasn't really a surprise to see him. The fact that he still played at least 50 minutes of the game against West Ham showed that maybe the injury wasn't too bad, because he was still playing with it, but of course it was a precaution to take him off before it got worse. And of course, yes, we lost out on his sort of attacking ability against West Ham, but I'd rather have him for a game like Leicester where he performed well as opposed to him making his injury worse. So of course it was great to see him recovering from that, and obviously aside from recovery, it was actually great to see that the injury wasn't serious as well, because obviously you've got a key player like this, so obviously you want to keep them fit. Now, of course, against West Ham, I thought he was fairly effective going forward. Not necessarily great, but he was fairly effective going forward. But one of the things I was disappointed about his performance here, and whether it's just the fact that he was still recovering from that shoulder injury and still had sort of twinges and he wasn't really looking to go too far forward and be too adventurous. But, he didn't really get forward as much as he would have liked, and as much as I personally would have liked to seen from him against Leicester. But the fact that he was still able to do a fairly solid job defensively, especially making sort of one-on-one tackles and challenges as well, that was one of the things that really was impressive for me. Now, much like Saka, in the fact that he's a player who likes to drive forward, yes, that was great in this game, and the fact that he's always looking to get us up the pitch is great, but the fact that he conceded possession quite cheaply on a few occasions was something which was quite disappointing. And the fact that he wasn't looking to get forward that much, the fact that on the few occasions he did go forward, he lost the ball a few times, wasn't really the greatest thing. And I personally do think, the fact that he was trying to do lovely sort of triangles and 1-2 passing was great, but the fact that a few of his teammates kept losing the ball or putting the ball, giving the ball back to the opposition, basically meant that sort of triangle going forward wasn't really working. And basically that meant that someone like Vardy, who likes to have a 1-2 and likes to take advantage of getting on the overlap, because we weren't necessarily doing that well, and whether that's because Leicester defended well or whether it's just because we weren't necessarily great at that sort of pass and move stuff, whatever it was, he didn't really seem to or his skills wasn't really utilised in the game. But nevertheless, I don't necessarily think he was terrible in this game, but in terms of making comparisons to last season, where he was very good defensively and offensively, he isn't really anywhere near that level where he was, especially at the end of last season. And that's mainly just because he's giving the ball away quite a lot when he goes forward. And yes, he's still doing his defensive job really well, and that's the thing I like. That's the reason he'll probably get a 7th overall for his defensive work. But the fact that when he went forward on a few occasions, albeit not a lot, the fact that he gave the ball away or passed the ball to the opposition, made it easy for them to regain possession, that was something that was really quite disappointing. But overall, Patrick Vardy, not a great performance. If I've got to rate his defensive play, I do think his contribution for the clean sheet was great, so maybe a 7 overall. But just for his sort of attacking play and the fact that he wasn't really looking to get forward as much as he would have liked and as much as we as fans would have liked to see from him, I'll probably give him a 5 for that attacking overall. So I do think a 6 overall is a fair reflection. But do comment below on your views, on his performance, and whether you do think, whether you think he should go forward more, or whether you think he should just go back to sort of just primarily being a right back, and then sort of think about going forward once we start, getting that defensive solidity back. Because yes, this was a clean sheet here, but in the 2 games previously we conceded 6 goals. So maybe he's going back to basics for the moment whilst we sort of get our rhythm back defensively, and then hopefully, going forward he can get that defensive work done. And like Wan-Bissaka on the other side, once he's got his defensive work sorted, and that's to a high standard, he can of course be more adventurous going forward. But Patrick Vardy here, a 6 for him, not the best and certainly not the worst performance from him. So now I'm going to move on to the first player in the midfield, and that's of course the captain, Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 7 overall for his performance. Now, before I go on to talk about Milivojevic's performance, because obviously that was great both defensively and offensively, we've got to talk about that sublime effort that he scored from about 25 yards. And of course, I could really go and talk about this goal for hours, in the fact that not only was the build-up play great for the goal, lovely passing from Wan-Bissaka and Andros Townsend, but also the fact that Milivojevic saw the space on the edge of the area, took a touch, and then just whipped it into that far post, right into that bottom corner, away from Kasper Schmeichel. The fact that he done that was absolutely fantastic. Now, like I've said already, I could sit here and talk for hours about that goal, because certainly it's up there for one of our goals of the season, albeit Andros Townsend's one, I think so far for me against Burnley, is probably up there. But the fact that Milivojevic scored this goal, which was once again so great, was of course great to see. Now, aside from the goal and the performance, I've got to talk about how many goals he's scored this season. Obviously, he's got 2 penalties against Arsenal, so obviously that's put him up to 2 goals. And the fact that he's got 2 other goals as well puts him to 4 for the season, which really just goes to show how much of an important player he is for us, in the fact that he's up there as one of our top scorers this season. So not only was the goal he scored really great and great quality from it, but it also was quite important in the fact that we haven't been scoring that many goals recently. So the fact that he popped up, I wouldn't really care if it was just a tapping from 2 yards out, but the fact that he popped up when we needed it, considering the fact that we haven't really been playing that great offensively, the fact that he popped up at that moment to score a goal of such great quality was of course great to see. Now, moving aside from the goal which he scored, which, you know, like I've said already, was absolutely sublime, you know, the fact that he stopped the ball on the edge of the area and shot, yes, that was all great, but going back to his overall performance, and one of the main reasons I've given him a 7 is just the fact that he was a calming presence in the midfield. Now, what I mean by that is the fact that whenever the ball sort of came in, or whenever you were sort of trying to get forward and trying to break Leicester down, rather than sort of, you know, trying to go at them and losing possession and trying to win it back and going back at them, rather than doing that, I think Luka, being that calm presence, he slowed the game down, you know, looked to pass the ball out wide or play the ball down the middle, try to drive forward. So rather than just trying to ping balls forward and trying to break down the opposition, the fact that he was that calming presence by slowing the game down was of course great to see. And the fact that he also combined that sort of calming presence with that sort of, I suppose, physicality, I suppose that's the word you could use, in the fact that he battled away in midfield, you know, considering it was quite challenging conditions, you know, loads of rain, and I don't really think it stopped throughout the game, the rain. So the fact that he was able to keep that calm presence in the game, whilst also, you know, battling well, putting his foot in to win challenges, you know, making life difficult for the Leicester midfield especially, that was of course great to see as well. Now, of course, the weather itself wasn't that great, but the game itself also wasn't that great, and I do think, if you're looking at the midfield in particular, it was quite a dull game because, you know, both teams are sort of quite even in that sort of aspect, you know, in terms of that midfield battle, which I talked about quite a lot last season. It was quite even in the fact that sort of Leicester's midfield was sort of nullified by ours and ours was nullified by them. So really, it was quite an equal game in that respect. But the fact that Milivojevic, even in them tough conditions, even with the fact that we weren't really getting anything from the game until he scored that superb goal, which he did, the fact that he still battled away well, and the fact that he was making these tackles and also leading the team well, making sure that the team would, you know, stay solid, keep their shape, to make sure we could hold on to that narrow 1-0 lead to go on to keep a clean sheet. That was of course really good to see. Now, in terms of one of the main reasons, and I suppose I say it's the main reason, I think this is the number one reason why I personally think he's deserves a 7. It's just the fact that he looked like the old Luka today. So I've talked about quite a lot this season in the fact that when he started the season, or especially the first sort of few games or so, he was not, you know, by far away from the standards he set last season, and certainly, you know, he was getting sort of 5s and 6s every week. But the fact that now he's back to his old self, where he's very combative in midfield, as well as combining that with the fact that he's got that quality on the ball to score goals like that, it was really, he was back to his old self. And, you know, the fact that, obviously, like I've said already, I wouldn't really have cared how we scored the goal. As long as we won the game, as long as we scored a goal, would have been great. But the fact that he scored it with one hell of a strike, whilst also putting in a good midfield performance, really sort of was sort of a throwback to last season where he was so great. So of course it was great to see over the last sort of few weeks or so where his performances have been improving. But the fact that he was back to his old self with such a good performance, that was one of the main reasons why I was impressed, because that was obviously great to see. But overall, Luka Milivojevic, the captain, a good performance in midfield from him. You know, very calming. He was a very calming presence in there, and the fact that he battled away, making challenges, making blocks, was of course great to see. And of course, you know, I've got to end it, you know, this sort of summary in the fact that he scored that superb goal from 25 yards. Nice build-up play in the sort of build-up to the goal. But the fact that he stopped the ball dead right on the edge of the area, found his space, then absolutely curled it fantastically into the bottom corner, was the thing that really did impress me. So Luka Milivojevic here, a good midfield performance, as well as combining it with such a good goal. I do think that 7 is well deserved. So I'm now going to move on to his midfield partner, Cheku Kouyaté, who I'm going to give a 7 overall for his performance. Now, much like what I said against West Ham, in the fact that Kouyaté was certainly one of our better players there, I do think this was a performance once again where Kouyaté did stand out for me in the fact that he was so effective in the game. Now, one of the things I did like about his performance, and I suppose it links to what I said with Luka, in the fact that he was very combative, in the fact that he always put his foot in to make challenges in the midfield. Now, obviously that's great in the fact that you're always getting involved and you're really showing your physicality up against the opposition. But the thing that really did impress me with Kouyaté is the fact that he combined that sort of ability to put his foot in and make the challenge with the fact that he made some important challenges and interceptions throughout the game. You know, there were numerous occasions where Leicester were breaking on the attack, and the fact that Kouyaté would be that man right in front of the defence alongside Luka, the fact that he was there to make these important challenges and interceptions was of course great to see. And, you know, like I've said already, you know, our attacking play wasn't that great, and the same could be said for Leicester's. But obviously when Leicester did get a few attacks forward, the fact that we dealt with them so well, you know, you've got to give a bit of credit to Kouyaté, because I do think he was one of the main players, you know, making these challenges, making these interceptions, which of course A, made it difficult for the opposition, but B, obviously stopped Leicester when they did get into their tracks. Now, one of the other things I liked about his performance, and you know, yes, his defensive play was great, and the fact that he made loads of challenges, loads of interceptions, yes, that was great, but the fact that he actually helped Palace go forward, even though we weren't the greatest going forward, but the fact that he actually helped us to get further up the pitch, was looking to carry the ball forward, was of course great to see as well. And you know, it goes back to what I sort of said with Wan-Bissaka, and the fact that Chiate's primary job is obviously to do that defensive work and give protection to the back four, but when he does go forward, he does it so efficiently in the fact that, yes, he's a defensive midfielder, but the fact that he can carry the ball so far forward, be that sort of a physical presence in the midfield to drive forward, that was the thing that really did impress me. And you know, it goes back to some of the things I was talking about last season in terms of having that link or having that transition from the defence to the midfield and from the midfield to the attack, and certainly Chiate is one of the key players in that because he makes that sort of transition from the midfield to the attack even better, and that's mainly just because of how well his play is in the midfield. Now, yes, his performance was great, but the thing that was really disappointing is that he actually couldn't carry on his good performance for the rest of the game, and that's because he got a knock in the second half. I believe it is a hamstring injury, so hopefully it's not too serious. But obviously, like what I said with Patrick Fernando in the West Ham game, I'd much rather us take him off and bring someone off the bench who can just see the game out, as opposed to Chiate carries on putting in a good performance but makes the injury worse. So hopefully the injury isn't too serious, but he's certainly a player who we can't necessarily afford to miss at the moment because of how good his performances are. And you know, going back to the game at the weekend, or the game coming up at the weekend against Man City, we're going to really have to be really tight and compact in midfield to make sure we can stop Man City. So Chiate is going to be one of these players who we really need to come back from injury, because him and his physical presence is going to be what we need against Man City. You know, we're probably not going to win, probably not going to keep a clean sheet, we're probably not even going to get a draw from Man City, but we just need to make sure that we put in a good, strong, compact defensive performance, especially from people like Chiate in midfield, just to make sure that we absolutely don't get ripped apart by City. But once again, the fact that I'm talking about our new signing Chiate, who's only played I think he's not even at 10 games yet for us, he may even just hit that, but the fact that he hasn't played too many games for Palace when you can compare him to other players in the side, the fact that he's still, the fact that he's one of our most important players, having played less games than everyone else, really just goes to show how well he's performing, and certainly he's going to be an important player for us going forth this season. Now, I suppose a word I could use to describe his overall performance is excellent, because the fact that he won so many tackles and still came away with the ball so many times when he made these challenges and interceptions, that was one of the things that really did impress me. And not only was he able to make these challenges and come away with the ball, but the fact that he made good use of it when he was, playing the ball forward, and when he was actually, trying to sort of impact our forward play. The fact that he was able to do that so well was one of the things that really did impress me. Now, in terms of my final point really about his performance, and I don't necessarily think it's about his performance individually, but actually in a partnership with Luka Milivojevic and Max Meyer, I do think that sort of partnership in midfield, that sort of three in midfield, and you could include McArthur there as the fourth, in the 4-4-2, but them guys as a unit, seem so strong in midfield, they seem to work really well, and actually they give us a really good balance. We've got Luka and Chiate who can do the defensive work, we've got McArthur and Meyer who can obviously give support to the wide defenders, your fullbacks, and then you've got someone like Max and McArthur as well who can also go forward. So not only have we got them playing well as a unit, but also they've got really good attributes which seem to work really well together. So not only was Chiate's individual performance was good, but the fact that he linked so well with his teammates, and the fact that they combined well and utilised each other's skills to play so well was of course really impressive. So Cheku Chiate here, good performance from him, and hopefully he does recover from that injury, but I do think a 7 overall is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to James McArthur, who I'm going to give a 6 overall for his performance. Now, in terms of McArthur's performance, and I suppose a word that I always use to describe his performances is essentially busy, and I do think this was another performance where he put in a shift for the side and certainly was busy in the fact that he was always looking to get involved in the midfield and was always looking to give 100%, 110% for the team. So the fact that he'd done that with his performance was of course great to see. Now, going back to the point I made about Leicester City and the fact that their sort of midfield sort of matched our midfield, and basically the game was quite a dull affair in the fact that both teams were solid enough defensively, but they didn't necessarily have that sort of potency or that sort of efficiency in front of goal. So the fact that McArthur done his role in midfield so well was of course great to see. And you go back to before the game where he'd done an interview with eagles.cbc.co.uk, I believe it was. The fact that he was talking about how he doesn't normally play in this position out wide, but he seems to enjoy it, and the manager seems to be getting the best out of him. The fact that Roy Hodgson has got him in a position now where he's in a position where McArthur's skills are not only utilised, but he seems to be enjoying it. That seems to be bringing out the best of him, and certainly this performance here against Leicester seemed to reflect that, in the fact that he wasn't necessarily great, but he was still very busy and still gave his all for the team, and certainly was effective in the fact that he managed to keep Leicester City at bay for the majority of the game. Now, even though he was so great, there was obviously negatives from his performance, and one of the main reasons I can't give him a 7 overall is just the fact that he picked up a booking. I think it was just at the end of the first half where Michael Oliver perceived it to be a dive right on the edge of the area, and of course, rightly so, if he thought it was simulation, he gets a yellow card. Now, I personally haven't had a chance to look at it, but from where I was in the upper Homesdale, it's really quite difficult to see because it was literally the opposite end of the pitch. So personally for me, I can't really comment on that, but if he did dive, then very silly on him in the fact that he he could have just avoided that yellow card by at least trying to stay on the ball. But nevertheless, a silly booking there. Whether it was a booking or not, I don't know, because like I've said, I hadn't seen it. But if it was, then it's obviously silly on him, awful him. But nevertheless, I do think that was one of the things that really did restrict me giving him a 7. It's just the fact that if he hadn't have picked up that yellow card, it really would have been just an overall, all-round good performance from him. But the fact that he'd done that was the thing that was slightly disappointing. But like I said already, I think he worked hard for the team, and that's something we come to expect from him. So it's not really surprising when he does that. But, I suppose something which has been the theme of this season, in the fact that he's played well in some games and has been consistent, in the fact that he hasn't necessarily been bad, but he's just been consistently average. And this was just another performance where, yes, he worked hard, yes, he was relatively good for the team, but he was obviously guilty of giving a ball away on a few occasions. And, I said that with a few players already. You look at Van Aanholt, you look at Sacco. These are players who are obviously guilty of giving the ball away. They weren't really punished. And the same really could go for McArthur, in the fact that he worked hard, played well for the team, but he obviously gave the ball away, which was a bit unnecessary at times. But the fact that he still made up for that with his sort of attacking play, and the fact that when he did lose the ball, he was able to track back and still do as much as he could to obviously defend against that was of course great to see as well. So overall, James McArthur, not the best performance, not the worst, and certainly would have been probably a performance worthy of a 7, like I've said, if he didn't pick up that silly yellow card. But overall, James McArthur, a 6 from him, another good performance. So I'm going to move on now to the final player in our midfield, and that is of course the German Max Meyer, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, the first thing I really want to pick out about his performance, and this is certainly if you've seen him or watched highlights of his play when he was at Schalke last season, and certainly last sort of few games or so, this really wouldn't come as a surprise to you. But the fact that he was very neat and tidy on the ball in this game here against Leicester was really a thing that was quite impressive. But one of the reasons I didn't give him a 7, and that sort of restricted him to that 6, is just the fact that he lacked that really incisive pass in the game. Now, I talked about against West Ham and the fact that he was one of our better players in what was a very bad game for us, losing 3-2. And, when you consider he got the assist for our second goal against West Ham, the fact that he showed that incisive pass was great. So, of course, coming into this game here against Leicester City, we were all expecting him to be that attacking threat again and actually look to put in similar crosses into the box. And, even though he carried on his form in the respect of being neat and tidy on the ball, using the ball very effectively, yes, that was great, but he just lacked that sort of final pass, that incisive pass, just to sort of break the deadlock, certainly at 0-0, and in terms of when it was 1-0, actually making that incisive pass to get that second goal just to cement our lead in the game. So that was a thing that was slightly disappointing, but the fact that his performance in midfield was still good, in the fact that how neat and tidy he was on the ball, that was a thing that was of course really nice to see. Now obviously one of the benefits of being very neat and tidy on the ball, it just means that unlike his midfield counterparts, people like McArthur, he hardly ever loses the ball, so it's great that he's able to retain possession, because it means that we can use the ball more efficiently because we have more of it. And obviously that's stating the obvious, but when you've got a player who does it so well, it's something that really does come out to you and is highlighted to you. And the fact that he was also, like I've said already, tidy on the ball as well. So the fact that he's able to hold on to the ball and also not let players, get it off him by being so tidy, that was of course really good to see as well. Now, I suppose this is something really that I necessarily don't agree 100% with, but this is something which I've seen a few people mention, so I might as well mention it nonetheless. And that's just the fact that yes, he's playing really well, but he just still needs to get used to the Premier League speed and physicality. And I suppose because of his size and because he's one of the shortest players on the pitch, maybe that's why he isn't necessarily as physical. But I do certainly think the more I see him play and the more games he plays, he seems to slowly be getting up to the Premier League speed. So yes, people have pointed it out, and that's why I wanted to sort of add it in there. And I don't necessarily think it's a major problem, but nonetheless it's something to pick out in the fact that yes, he's neat and tidy on the ball, yes, he's very agile, and yes, he didn't do it against Leicester, but yes, he's actually very good at actually having an incisive pass and actually getting in behind the defence. Yes, that's great, but maybe he just needs to get a little bit more used to the physicality of the Premier League, because I do think if you combine his sort of ability on the ball with the fact that he's got that physicality to drive forward, that would be absolutely great to see, because you've got someone like Guaita who's really good at driving the ball forward because of his physicality, but he's not necessarily the greatest on the ball in terms of technical ability. But then on the other hand, we've got someone like Max Meyer who's very technically gifted, but necessarily because he's maybe a little bit short, he hasn't got that physicality. So if he can sort that out and actually get back to that, or get up to that Premier League speed, I think it'd be an absolutely fantastic, you know, attacking player for us going forward. Because if you, like I said, if you combine his ability on the ball, his dribbling, his ability to actually hold on the ball and keep possession, with that physicality, which will allow him to not only play incisive passes but actually be incisive in the fact that he drives forward, that of course would be great to see. But overall, Max Meyer, good performance from him, and certainly does deserve the 6 overall that I've given him. So I'm going to move on now to the first of our 2 strikers, and that is of course Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now of course, much like what I talked about Tompkins and the fact that he got suspended after the game, Wilfried Zaha got suspended because he picked up his 5th yellow card in the game against West Ham. And you know, I said already, you know, players were sort of losing their heads and making silly challenges. So yes, it was a yellow card for Wilfried Zaha, but of course it was a silly booking for him to pick up. And ultimately we didn't have to pay the price here, because this was of course the first game we won without Wilfried Zaha since September 2016. But nevertheless, not having your star man, you know, could have really hurt us, and basically, you know, we wouldn't be sitting in this situation here where I'm talking about a Palace win. You know, if he had been playing, maybe we would have had a better chance to win the game. But nevertheless, we actually managed to win a game without him, and I know I really sort of confused my words there. But anyway, I digress. If we had Wilfried Zaha, then maybe it would have been a different game. But the fact that we still won without him really just goes to show how well, you know, Andros Townsend and Jordan Ayew did. Now, yes, they didn't do a fantastic job, but you know, when you consider a player like Wilfried Zaha's absent from your side, there's going to be no hope. You know, I personally was dreading this game in the fact that we haven't got our star man, we're not going to win it. But the fact that players stepped up, obviously Luka Milivojevic in particular, the fact that they stepped up and made up for the absence in Wilfried Zaha was of course great to see. And yes, Zaha's great, and if he played in this game, we probably maybe would have won by a few more goals. But nevertheless, you know, his influence was missed, but not as much as it could have been, because obviously the players all around the team obviously made up for that loss overall. Now, one of the things I was really impressed with Andros Townsend's performance, and the main reason I've given him a 6, is something that really won't come as a surprise, and that's just the fact that he worked really hard up top, you know, running down the channels, running at the centre-backs and goalkeepers, and basically just putting pressure on the Leicester City back 4. And the fact that he also used this sort of winger abilities to actually drag the Leicester defenders wide, to allow people like Ayew and Meyer and McArthur to actually get down the middle, by the fact that Townsend was drifting from a striker position to a winger position. The fact that he was dragging the Leicester City players wide allowed our other attacking players to actually get forward as well. And you know, that was of course great to see. And you know, even though he may not have had that final quality or that final bit of end product to actually get something from the end of it, the fact that he was actually looking quite actively to actually have a go at the back four for Leicester, having a go, making it difficult for them, whilst also dragging him out of position, that was of course great to see as well. Now, like I said already, in the fact that he didn't necessarily have that many chances in front of goal, really, you know, in and around the box, he had he was there on loads of times. You know, he was positioned in that area quite a number of times. But like I've said, he didn't necessarily have that final bit or that final end product. But the fact that he found himself in that attacking position, by the fact that he was, you know, just running hard at Leicester City centre backs and full backs, and the fact that he was dragging them out of position, was of course great to see as well. Now, like he always does, he puts in 110%, and that's something I can never really fault him for. So of course it was great to see him here, considering he doesn't have his normal strike partner in Wilfried Zaha, so the pressure was particularly on him to perform. So the fact that he still put in 110%, you know, put in all of his effort, was of course great to see. And like I said, even though he didn't offer that much up top, the fact that he got an assist for Luka's role really just sort of gave him something he could take from the game. Because I've talked about quite a lot this season in the fact that we've played well, but we haven't necessarily got the reward. So much like when Wayne Hennessey got the clean sheet at Old Trafford, the same could be said here with Andros Townsend in the fact that yes, he may not necessarily got anything from the game in terms of a goal but the fact that he performed so well, the fact that he got rewarded with an assist for Luka Milivojevic's goal was of course great to see as well. And it's great to see players, albeit they're not directly being rewarded for their efforts, the fact that Townsend put in loads of effort and actually got at least an assist for it, because people would say, oh, you worked hard up top, but that's it. So the fact that he combined that with the assist for the goal was of course great to see. And I've talked quite a lot about the goal already, but that sort of interplay for the assist, between Andros Townsend and Wan-Bissaka down that right hand side, that was a nice little bit of build-up play, nice sort of triangle passing, 1-2 passing, and the fact that Townsend was able to find Milivojevic in space on the edge of the area was what made it even better. So overall, Andros Townsend, good performance from him in the absence of Wilfried Zaha. Yes, he didn't 100% make up for the loss in Zaha, but nevertheless we managed to sort of get rid of that burden and finally win a game without Wilfried Zaha with a good performance from Townsend. So certainly I do think he does deserve the 6 I've given him. So I'm going to move on now to the final player in our starting 11, and that is of course Jordan Ayew, who I'm going to give a 5 overall. Now, much like what I said with Andros Townsend, in the fact that he was playing in the place of Wilfried Zaha, that was sort of the same thing could be said here for Ayew, in the fact that Townsend, primarily when Zaha plays, Townsend would quite often drift out wide, so we'll be looking at sort of an interchanging role, so there's no set position for Townsend, whereas Jordan Ayew, he was sort of a player who was, I suppose, more so than Townsend, but actually given that primarily striker position. So whilst Townsend was able to change positions, I think Jordan Ayew's job was primarily to be a striker, and that's where Zaha's been playing. So essentially, Jordan Ayew was the man to come into the side and make up for Zaha. And like Andros Townsend, he worked hard but with little reward. So yes, Townsend got a little reward in the fact that he got the assist, but aside from that, he didn't really have that many opportunities in the game. And when you compare that to Jordan Ayew, he worked extremely hard for the team, put in 110%. And in terms of just his effort, I'll probably give him a 7. But just with his quality on the ball and sort of his attacking chances, you're going to give him maybe a 4 or a 5. Mainly because that was really disappointing. Now, obviously, he does lack a bit of quality, and we've seen that in recent games. And maybe that's one of the reasons why he didn't have that many chances. But if he can get that mix right between having loads of energy, putting in loads of effort, if he can sort of combine that with just having a little bit of quality in the final third, then that would be great to see, because he found himself in quite a number of good positions throughout the game. Certainly on the counter attack, we pump the ball forward and he has a great chance just to run at the defender or cut inside, but instead of that, he obviously takes one touch too many or gets dispossessed by the opposition. So whilst he's having that intent and finding himself in good positions, he's not necessarily making good use of it. And also, one of the other things that really did get on my nerves, and certainly the people around me in the upper homes there were really getting frustrated with it, is just the fact that yes, he was getting into good positions, but almost double the amount of times he was also being caught offside. So that was of course something that's disappointing, and that's something you would expect from a Premier League player, to actually know when they're offside or not. So to continuously see Jordan Ayew in offside positions where if he had just timed his run a few seconds later, or if he had just held back a few seconds before, then maybe he wouldn't have been offside and maybe he would have had a great chance to go through on goal. So yes, his effort was great, but the fact that he found himself in good positions but didn't take the most of it, whilst also combining that with his lack of awareness by being caught offside so many times, was of course really disappointing overall. Now, in terms of just an overall sort of summary of his game, and the main reason I've given him a 5 is just the fact that he's sort of 10 times the player he is off the ball than he is on it, and that just goes back to what I said in the fact that he's really good at actually putting in effort and making it working hard for the team. But obviously on the ball he isn't that great. He's not really good at he's good at getting into positions but not good at finishing his chances, and of course just his sort of game awareness and the fact that offside, that weren't great as well. So in terms of his play off the ball, he's doing everything right and probably a 7 overall, but the fact that he's 10 times less the player on the ball really just goes to show the lack of sort of quality he has on it. But like I said already, the fact that he worked hard from the top, sort of defending from the front, making it difficult for the Leicester City back four was of course great to see. And when you consider our sort of pressure to actually get it to 1-0 was quite important in the first half. So in that respect, Jordan Ayew's work in terms of working hard from the front, defending from the front was obviously very important in the first half. But in the second half, where we really need the players to step up and get that second goal, just to make sure we could cement the win, albeit we've won the game now with a clean sheet, but there are a few nervy moments in the game where we should have been pushing for a second goal. When that should have come, obviously players like Jordan Ayew, where you would expect the goals to come from as the primary striker, it weren't really coming. So even though he seemed to work his boots off, tried to give his all for the team, the fact that he lacked that real quality in that final third, especially when we were sort of pushing to get our second goal, that was of course really disappointing. And of course towards the end of the game, not really to anyone's surprise, and certainly there were a few people clapping him, mainly because he worked hard for the team, but also because we just wanted him to get off the pitch and we wanted to welcome Sorloth on, just because Sorloth will just give us a bit more of a presence up top. So overall, Jordan Ayew, not the best performance from him, not the worst, but certainly going in the right direction in terms of working well off the ball, but he just needs to work on getting into these good positions, taking chances, not making sure he's offside. So if we can combine his good work off the ball with his work on the ball, then of course we might see better performances from him in the coming weeks. But overall, Jordan Ayew, slightly disappointing performance, but nonetheless a 5 overall. So I'm now going to move on to the 3 subs we made in the game, starting with Jeffrey Schlupp, who obviously came on for Chiarte in the 64th minute. Now I'm probably going to give him a 5 overall, mainly because he came on with obviously 26 minutes or so of the game remaining, and he obviously came in to replace Chiarte, who of course, as I already mentioned, went off injured, and that basically meant that Maya went into a more central role, and of course Jeffrey Schlupp played in Maya's role out wide. And basically he was just there just to sort of see the game out, and basically he wasn't really there to make any difference to the game, mainly because he was a forced substitution, obviously replacing Chiarte. Now obviously I think that he could have done better in the fact that he lost the ball a little bit too often for my liking, which of course isn't great. You want your attacking players to keep hold of the ball, but the fact that he was fairly steady, fairly consistent in the fact that whenever he got the ball, he was always looking to go forward, always looking to attack, to actually try and get us to get into attacking position so we could get that second goal. And the fact that he actually done it with, whilst not having too much influence on the game, was the thing that was slightly disappointing. But the fact that he sort of came on the pitch, even though it was a forced substitution, just to help see the game out, that was something which you really want to expect from substitutions. You're going to have 2 types of subs. You either need one who's going to completely change the game, or someone just to keep a steady head and just see out the game. And certainly Jeffrey Schlupp was the latter of that, in the fact that he wasn't necessarily terrible, but the fact that he lost the ball a fair bit. But then, you look at the fact that he was always looking to go forward. You've got the negatives and the positives. So I do think overall, a 5 is a fair rating overall for his performance. And he is certainly a player who seems to be, number 1 choice off the bench now. Always seems to come on off the bench. And actually, even though this performance wasn't great, you look back to the West Ham game where he scored the goal, obviously making an influence off the bench. You're looking at this game here where he may not have been the greatest and not made much influence, but the fact that he was looking to go forward was great. So he's got all the attributes here at the minute of a player who's doing the right thing. So hopefully in the games coming forward, he can carry on with this type of form, because even though he may not be starting every game, the fact that we've got someone off the bench who's looking to go forward, if we ever find ourselves in a situation where we actually need to go forth and get the game, the fact that he's got that attacking intent may be something which will be useful going forward. Now in terms of Alexander Sorloth, our second sub, he came on for Ayew in the 76th minute. I'm going to give him a 6 overall, mainly because he was obviously given a chance to impress, obviously when he placed Ayew, and when you consider Ayew was so ineffective in the game in terms of his ability on the ball, it basically meant that whenever you bring someone on, they're going to be better than him. And certainly Sorloth, he wasn't necessarily great, but he was significantly better than Ayew, who of course was ineffective in the game. Now you could argue that obviously Sorloth failed to really seize his chance, because there were a few sort of promising positions, certainly one where he literally drove into the box to the byline, but as opposed to cutting inside and maybe having a shot, he just blasted it across the face of goal and nothing came from it. So maybe in that situation he could have done better, but the fact that he actually still came on the pitch, played his part, and even though it would have been nice to see him be a bit more of a goal threat, the fact that he still came on and was looking to win all the knockdowns, looking to carry the ball forward, and as that occasion showed, if he had just taken another touch or cut inside, he maybe could have shot there, caused the goalkeeper to make a save, and then maybe we score from the deflection. So even though he was slightly effective in some parts of his game in terms of driving forward, maybe that sort of decision making where rather than cutting the ball inside at the right moment, he dribbles too far forward, or rather than cutting inside and having a shot, he just shoots across the face of goal. So even though he came on and was looking to do the right things, he couldn't quite pull it off. So overall, I do think a 6 is a fair reflection of his contribution. And of course, Jason Puncheon came on for Max Meyer in the 90th minute. Not really going to give him a rating because it really wasn't any time for him to make an impact. But I suppose the only positive of that is actually quite nice now to see Jason Puncheon finally, after his injury, after coming back from that, nice to see him finally getting some game time quite consistently week in, week out in the side. Now, in terms of just an overall summary of the game, I think that this game overall, if you're looking at it, it basically sort of was us carrying on from where we left off in the Burnley game. Now, of course, Burnley were terrible in the game we played against them, and of course, Leicester were significantly better because they're no mugs. But nevertheless, the fact that we put in a performance, even though it was a dull game, you know, the fact that we popped up at the right moment to score a fantastic goal and just managed to get the goal in the first place, but also the fact that we were able to hold on to that 1-0 lead and keep the clean sheet. The fact that we were able to do that against quality opposition that Leicester are, you know, top half team, was of course great to see. And, you know, unlike the Burnley game where the opposition weren't that great, Burnley were sort of similar to us in terms of their effort and ability in the game. It's just the fact that we edged them in the fact that we were able to score that goal and the fact that we were able to hold on to that lead. Now, in terms of the performance overall, I think it was a really great battling performance, albeit we weren't necessarily the greatest and it was quite a dull game. The fact that they were battling, the players were trying to give their all for the team, that was of course great. And sometimes that's all that matters. You know, if your players give their all, eventually you'll be able to grind out a result like we did here. And to be honest, I suppose the positives you could take from that performance is the fact that it sort of gives you a real confidence that even when we're not playing that great, we can still grind out a result with, you know, individual quality. And that's basically because of the character shown by the players. You know, after the West Ham game, I sort of questioned it in the fact that some of the players might be losing their heads. But the fact that the players came out against Leicester City, who obviously had a better season than West Ham. Obviously, West Ham are on the rise, but the fact that Leicester City have started the season so well, the fact that we came out against them, who you could argue on paper are a better team than West Ham, we come out against a better team and perform even better, don't let our heads drop from the West Ham game, and perform so well so we can eventually grind out a result. That was of course great to see. Now, in terms of key moments in the game that really just epitomised the battling sort of performance narrative I'm talking about, the great strike from Luka, obviously that goal was great, the link-up play before it, you know, the 1-2 passing on the right was great, the fact that Andros Townsend found Luka was obviously great as well, and of course the strike itself, you know, curling it into the bottom corner away from Kasper Schmeichel, that was of course great to see as well. And of course that fantastic save in the last sort of 10 minutes or so, you know, Guaita made from Jamie Vardy, that was of course great to see as well. So two moments there which really just did epitomise, you know, the goal itself which got us into the lead, and of course Guaita making a really important save to keep us in the game. So there's sort of two key moments which really sort of epitomised our performance overall. Now, the only downside of the performance is really it showed, you know, I talked about the subs a minute ago, really just shows that the players on the bench, we really need someone who can come on and change the game, because in this game here, in my opinion, we were just crying out for something around about the 60th minute mark, but obviously there was nothing really just to give us that edge. And the reason we needed to get the edge in the game is because Leicester was slowly trying to get back into the game, slowly getting into it. So rather than us having the threat of conceding the equaliser, we really should have just brought someone off the bench just to give us that edge, just to go on. And even if we didn't get the equaliser, or say even if we stop Leicester's getting an equaliser and actually push forward and get a second goal, even though that wasn't the case, it would have been nice for us just to sort of push forward and actually try and at least get another goal in the game, or even just an attempt to stop Leicester, you know, having as many chances as they had towards the end of the game. If we had done that, then maybe that would have been better, and certainly having someone off the bench and someone just to bring on just to give us that edge obviously would have been better. But to be honest, I suppose my final really point here is the fact that we created next to nothing in the game, which once again goes to highlight how bad we are in front of goal. But like I said, the fact that we've got individual talent like Luka who could just step up, and when we grind out a result they can pop up with the quality, that was of course great to see. But considering we put in a performance here where all the players put in a shift and ground out the result, yes, obviously we were quite lucky that Luka scored that worldie, but we really need the players to really up their game, you know, perform like we did against Leicester and Burnley, but just up it even more, be more compact and play even better, because especially when we've got Man City at the weekend, if we can do that, put in a good performance, you know, try and at least counter City on, you know, try and at least counter them so we can get a goal from the game. But like I've said, if everyone could put in a shift and we can, you know, just defend well and be compact, then maybe we'll have a chance against City next weekend. I personally am not very hopeful of it, but at least if we don't get battered, that'd be a positive in my eyes. So hopefully all of the team can put in a battling performance against Man City at the weekend, because of course it's going to be no easy game. So now I'm going to move on to the Man of the Match award, but before I do that, I give you my Man of the Match and why I thought the biggest influence in the game. I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now, as you obviously heard in the player ratings, in the fact there was a pretty dull game from both teams, and certainly you could be looking at it and going, aside from the wonder goal that Luka scored, we'd probably be looking at a 0-0 here. In that respect, it was quite a dull game, and really that's just because both teams didn't really have that much attacking threat in the game, and certainly both teams tried to counter-attack, but nothing really came off the end of it. And also you could look at it and go, both teams defended quite resolutely throughout the whole game. So really, it was sort of basically both teams nullified each other's attacks. So both teams didn't have that many attacks, but when they did attack, the defence of both sides, both Palace's and Leicester's, defended so well. So really, both threats from both sides were really nullified. Now, of course, Palace, we obviously went on to win the game, which is all great. And even though it was quite a dull game, you'd be looking at it and going, yes, you could be saying we probably deserved to draw the game, but the fact that we ground out the result, we had that grip, we had that determination to obviously first get that wonder goal, but then to go on and actually hold on to our lead. The fact that we had that resilience to get the lead, at the end of that first half, just before the ref was going to blow the whistle. The fact that we got that, then went on to the second half and still held on to that lead, that was really great as well. So although the game itself was quite dull, the thing that's really quite impressive and the thing that's obviously quite great to see is the fact that we not only done something better than the opposition to actually get the goal in what was a dull game, but also the fact that we managed to hold on to that lead was obviously great in itself. Now, in terms of the 4 players I put forward, I've gone with a mixture, let's say, for different types of contributions to the game, and I certainly do think it's a fair reflection of our defensive play throughout the game, because our defence was actually one of the best bits or best aspects of our play against Leicester. So certainly the 4 players I've picked do reflect that. Now, in terms of the 4 players, I've gone with Vicente Guaita, Martin Kelly, Cheku Karte and Luka Milivojevic. Now, in terms of Vicente Guaita, obviously you've already heard about me talking about him in quite a lot of detail, but obviously making his Premier League debut, so you could expect him to be relatively shaky. But the fact that he seemed very confident in the game, other than that sort of slip up with Jamie Vardy, if you put that aside, the fact that he looked very confident, was catching, was punching, the fact that he was doing everything you would expect from a Premier League goalkeeper so well was obviously great to see. But the main reason he makes it onto this shortlist is just the fact that he made that amazing save from Jamie Vardy, which was absolutely fantastic. Yes, people may say, it came off the post, so it's not necessarily that great a save, but the fact that Guaita had that touch to push it onto the post, there into a position where he could obviously catch the ball, the fact that he done that is the thing that's really impressive. Now, if he hadn't have made that touch, it would have gone in at a far corner or the far post, but the fact that Guaita had that little touch on Vardy's shot, which was good, by the way, the fact that Vardy latched onto that pass in the first place was great. So the fact that Guaita got that touch and flicked it onto the post and was able to once again see the ball and then jump on it and make that catch there, the fact that he was able to do that was really impressive. Now, for me, the fact that he was so confident, that was obviously great to see, but the fact that he added to that and put that cherry on top of the cake with that fantastic save towards the end of the game, about 10 minutes left, the fact that he'd done that really kept our lead in the game, but also obviously meant that he kept a clean sheet on his debut, which is really quite impressive. Now, if you look back at the 4 games Guaita's played in his Palace career so far, 3 of them have been clean sheets, which really goes to show, albeit some of them were against lesser opposition, it still goes to show that actually he's got a quality about him. And we obviously saw in this game with that save from Jamie Vardy was also just his overall confident play. We obviously saw quite what a player he is. So certainly Vicente Guaita does deserve to be on the shortlist. In terms of Martin Kelly, I've obviously once again talked about him quite a lot in the player ratings, but the thing that I liked about him is the fact that how well he dealt with Jamie Vardy. Now, when you consider Martin Kelly, he doesn't normally start in the side, and he's obviously a very good squad player, and the fact that he comes in when you need him, the fact that he done so well against Jamie Vardy, won almost everything, and essentially kept Vardy out of the game, because you look a few seasons ago, no defender had a chance with Vardy. So the fact that Kelly dealt with him so well whilst winning everything was obviously great to see. And the main thing for me really is that, yes, his defensive performance was really well, obviously not just against Jamie Vardy, but that in particular, but his overall defensive play, winning headers, putting blocks in, that was obviously great as well. But the fact that he was just able to slot into that side and just prove a really good replacement for James Tompkins, and the fact that he was able to provide that cover whilst also just putting in a very good performance as well, and basically making it look like we weren't missing someone from our normal back four. The fact that we were able just to slot him in there and it not make that much difference was of course great to see. Now obviously he's on here because he dealt with Jamie Vardy so well, but the thing I really want to pick out is just the sheer amount of important challenges he made throughout the game. And if it weren't for a few of these tackles challenges, as well as a few clearances as well, we might not have been able to conserve that clean sheet. Or like I said, in terms of our second half performance, in terms of holding on to that lead, obviously if Martin Kelly didn't perform to the standard or the high standard he played in the game, then maybe we would have seen a different outcome come the second half. But once again, good performance from him, both defensively and certainly up against Jamie Vardy. And like I said with Vicente Guaita, he was very important and certainly helped us to keep the clean sheet for the side. So even though James Tompkins will come into the side against Manchester City, the fact that Martin Kelly once again proved that he's a good option, not only off the bench but actually to bring into the side if we ever have an injury or a suspension, that was of course great to see. So moving on now to our third player, and that is of course Cheku Kouyaté. Now before we're going to talk about him and why I've put him on the shortlist, I've got to say last few weeks or so he's been up here with one of our best players, which really goes to show his consistency. And of course once again it was great to see him against Leicester put in such a good performance. Now one of the things I liked about his performance here was the fact that he was always putting his foot in the midfield, so the fact that he was always ready to actually make a challenge and stick a leg in and actually get the ball off the opposition. And basically against a very physical Leicester side, the fact that he was just willing, let's say, to actually get in there and get involved, that was of course great to see. And much like what I said with Kelly, he obviously combined that work in midfield with the fact that he made important challenges. So two players already on the shortlist, they're on here because of the sheer amount of important challenges and interceptions they made throughout the game. Now obviously Martin Kelly was great at stopping Jamie Vardy, but Kouyaté on the other hand, he was the guy who was breaking up the Leicester attacks before they got to the attacking players. So he was the guy making these important challenges and interceptions in the midfield, stopping ball, getting to the likes of Jamie Vardy up top. So the fact that he was doing that, breaking their play up so efficiently, was obviously great to see. And it goes back to that point I said at the beginning, in the fact that yes, it wasn't a great game, it was quite dull, but the fact that the first half was about us getting that goal and the second half was about us holding on to the lead, the fact that Kouyaté was one of these main players in the fact that he stopped Leicester attacking so that Leicester wouldn't have a chance to get back into the game, that was of course great to see. Now another thing I liked about his performance, and one of the main reasons he's on this shortlist as opposed to his challenges, is the fact that he helped us in transition and helped us going forward. So obviously we've seen this over the last sort of few weeks or so it didn't really come as a surprise, but the fact that he done it so efficiently against Leicester, albeit both teams' attacks weren't that great, but the fact that Kouyaté was one of our better players, in the fact that he would pick up the ball from deep and try and spray it forward and try and use his physicality to drive forward, the fact that he'd done that so well was of course great to see. Now the only disappointing thing about his performance is the fact that he got taken off with a knock in the second half, and hopefully, I believe it's a hamstring injury, hopefully it isn't too serious, but I do certainly think that if he had been on the pitch even longer, maybe we would have been able to get a second goal, because when you consider the fact that how physical he was in midfield and the fact that he was making it difficult for Leicester, he probably would have been able to, with his ability going forward, possibly get us a second goal. Or on the other hand, because Leicester were attacking quite a lot more in that sort of second half they were really pushing, trying to get an equaliser. Certainly Kouyaté could have nullified that attack, or the attacks from Leicester, even more so if he had been on the pitch. But luckily for us it didn't really matter, but I still do think if he had been on the pitch, then maybe we would have been able to even better. We dealt with Leicester relatively well in the final sort of 10 minutes or so, but the fact that we actually, basically Leicester were pushing forward more, maybe if Kouyaté hadn't have got injured and if he'd been on the pitch, then maybe he could have nullified their threat even more. But nevertheless, the time he was on the pitch, like I said already, fantastic in midfield, making challenges, making interceptions, and done a fantastic job of breaking up Leicester's attacks. Now our final player on the shortlist is Luka Milivojevic. Now I say this every time a player scores a great goal, but when Milivojevic was on the edge of the area, everyone was shouting for him to shoot. He done exactly that, and from 25 yards out put a fantastic ball into the bottom corner. Now if you score any goal like that, you're obviously going to make it into the man of the match shortlist, because obviously it's such a great goal. But actually, if you look at Milivojevic's performance aside from the goal, it was very good as well. Now much like his counterpart in midfield, Kouyaté, I do think in the midfield he was doing a great job. And whilst Guaita was the guy, putting a foot in, trying to get physical with the opposition, and basically making life difficult for Leicester, Milivojevic was slightly different in the fact that he was just bringing that calming presence to the midfield. So basically sort of calming the midfield down, passing the ball out when it needed to, slowing the game down, but also, like Guaita, actually getting in and making these good challenges and interceptions when they need to be made. So of course it was great to see the captain Milivojevic do that, but the fact that he combined that battling away in midfield in them challenging conditions, the fact that he combined that with that fantastic sublime goal that he scored from 25 yards was obviously great to see. Now, he's a player who at the beginning of the season obviously wasn't really playing that great, so the fact that now he's putting in performances like this where not only they're just good performances but also they're performances which are getting him onto the shortlist for man of the match really just goes to show how much he's improved recently. And like I've said here, much like Guaita, I thought he was brilliant in the midfield in terms of making challenges and interceptions. Great at actually slowing the game down when it needed to be. And of course, when the chance fell to him on the edge of the area, we weren't really having any joy in that half. So the fact that when he had a chance, rather than pondering on it, he took it straight away. And like I've said, a fantastic goal, lovely dipping effort into that bottom corner from 25 yards, and certainly a goal which is worthy of winning any game. Now obviously it was quite hard from these 4 players, and certainly other players in the squad as well, to actually pick a man of the match, because I do think as a team collective, even though the game was quite dull, I do think the team performance was quite good, especially defensively. But out of these 4 players, I'm going to give it to Martin Kelly. So congratulations, Martin. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you get my sincere congratulations on what was yet another solid performance from you. But the main reason I'm going to give it to him, as opposed to, Guaita, Guaita or Milivojevic, is basically just because of how good he was defensively. Not only the fact that he dealt with Jamie Vardy so well, it's just the fact that the sheer amount of important challenges and interceptions he made throughout the game, and the fact that in that back 4, he actually helped us to keep a clean sheet. That was one of the main reasons he's in there for me. Yes, Guaita was very confident, made good saves. Guaita challenges and interceptions and making it difficult for Leicester in attack. And obviously Milivojevic for that fantastic goal and just being that calming presence in the midfield. Yes, that was all great, but the fact that Kelly was at the back, got drafted in, obviously, where he doesn't normally play, the fact that he still performed to a high level, proving that once again he's a good replacement and good defensive cover. The fact that he'd done that whilst also, putting in loads of important challenges, stopping every Leicester attack by, clearing the ball. The fact that he'd done that whilst also making these interceptions as well, that was of course great to see. So for me, Martin Kelly, for his defensive performance, that's why he's won the award. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Luka Milivojevic, Martin Kelly and James McArthur following the game.
Luka, how big is that for you?
Very big, massive 3 points for us, 100%. I think we deserve today after everything, and we are so happy.
Talk me through the goal.
Yeah, just was ball from Andros. I see the space, there was the space. I decided to shoot, and after that was a wonderful goal.
How tough are the conditions today?
Very hard for both teams, but what we can do, we have to deal with that.
What about now the fact that you've ended that stat that you can't win when Wilfried Zaha doesn't play for you?
It happened like that. We had many games where we had scored, but in the end we lost, and I think today we break that as well.
You've had 2 back-to-back home wins now. How important is that for you?
Very important, especially because of fans. From the beginning of the season, we didn't took many points here in our stadium, and we take that back. What is very important as well for us as a team, and for our confidence, and as well for our supporters.
What about that moment in the second half when your goalkeeper makes an outstanding save on his debut and it comes back off the post and straight to him?
I freeze in that moment, I saw the ball in the goal, but I think many times this season we didn't have luck. Today, from that situation, we had luck, and I think we all as a team, we deserve that today.
Congratulations on the win today. What did you think of the game?
I felt we'd done really well as a team. Showed, again, how dangerous we are at home, especially with how loud the fans are at our home games. I think we put up a real strong performance, and we fought, every one of us, for them 3 points, and we got them today.
And the goal from Luka, it was a fantastic finish.
Yeah, I think probably looking back at the first half, we could have got the ball out of our feet and had more shots. So for him to not hesitate and have an attempt, it paid off.
How important did the game feel going into it?
Yeah, every game now feels massive. It always has in the Premier League. There's no games that you take for granted, but we know going into the home games that we've got a real chance of getting a result because of how good our fans are when we're at home. They set us off, put us on the front foot. It's brilliant. And
the clean sheet, even more impressive with obviously you coming in defence today and Guaita, two players that stepping in that neither of you have played for a while, so it must be great to get that clean sheet.
Yeah, it's always a bonus getting a clean sheet and doing your job as such. You come in, you've got to be ready. You never know when your chance is going to come. But in the Premier League, if you've been around for as long as I have, you know that you've got to keep yourself in tip-top position, condition. Sorry, and when you do get your chance, you've got to, not look out of place as such. And both of us never. Vicente's been training his socks off, waiting for his chance, and yeah, he saved us again, didn't he, with the save he made. So he was brilliant.
Yeah, we didn't interview with him. His English has come along since he first joined, but I presume he learnt all the footballing terms first.
Yeah, he's quite a character, Vicente. If you get to know him, he doesn't know much English, but he knows the basics and he knows enough for you to communicate on the pitch, and that's what you need with the big man behind you. You need him to be talking to the people in front. He can see the whole pitch, so yeah, he's settled in well, and I'm sure he'll be made up. He's had his chance and he's done well.
Very, very, very well done. It was a bleak cold afternoon. It needed a moment of grandeur to win it, and what a moment it was. What a strike that was.
Yeah, Luka's got that in the locker. He scored a lot like that last year, and it's a big win for us. We really needed it today.
And of course, the hoodoo can be laid to rest. You've won without Wilfred Zaha. You must have been sick and tired of that.
He's an important player for us. Obviously, we miss him when he's not playing, but today we dug in there and made sure that we got the result.
And you really dug in yourself. I thought it was an excellent performance by you in there. Whatever role you were asked to perform, and you had a variety of roles today.
Yeah, it's obviously right, but Cheku pulled up with a hamstring, I think. I'm not really sure what it was. So I went into the centre and tried to do my best for the team.
You went in there, range your passes and everything, and get your tackles in.
Yeah, that's my game.
Overall, it was an important thing as well to get a back-to-back home wins, James.
Yeah, it was. It was very important. Now we can try and obviously kick on and try and push up that table. We've been quite inconsistent this season, so it's about trying to get that consistency and getting more wins on the table.
Performances in the midfield area, defensively strong. It's just putting the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, but every team struggles throughout the Premier League at one point in the season. It's about consistency now. I think that's a big thing in our game. We're playing really well at times. It's obviously about being clinical on both ends.
Well, you must be delighted.
Well, of course I am. I thought that our first half performance was really excellent against such a good team. But unfortunately in the second half especially we had to sort of make the change. Guaita had done so well, but we had to reorganise our team yet again, and we'd already had to reorganise quite a lot due to the suspensions and injuries. So after that I thought Leicester did very well. They got on top of us. But the great thing for me to be able to sort of state today is that despite them getting on top of us in that area, our back four and our midfielders worked so very hard, and we restricted them to few chances. And then when a little bit of luck was needed, for once it went our way. Quite a few times I've stood here in front of your camera and listened to people like yourself telling me you were unlucky today and you won't be able to do that because we had the stroke of luck when we needed it. But it was a vital victory, and I think the players deserve an awful lot of credit for pulling that victory out of the bag.
Especially, I guess, with the likes of you've had to bring Martin Kelly in, who's not had many starts, but equally your keeper comes in for his debut and gets a hand before it bounces off the post and comes back to him.
That was a good save, wasn't it? And to be fair, Martin Kelly was excellent. He really was, and you're quite right. Tompkins and Saka have been so much our chosen centre-back pairing, and they've both done very well because we actually, strangely enough, for a team in the wrong half of the league, we haven't let in that many goals. We've let in 6 in 2 matches, but if you take the previous, if you like, 15 matches, our goal against record is good. Our goals for record is not good, and we didn't exactly boost that to any great extent today, but we boosted it by the 1 goal more than theirs, which was necessary, yeah.
What about the goal?
Oh, it was a wonder goal, was it? A wonder strike. I thought we were good value for that 1-0 lead at half time. I think it would have been a curmudgeonly person who would have begrudged us leading 1-0 at half time. I think at the end, I'm sure the Leicester City people will say they deserve to get a draw from the game, and they'll point to that good save which rebounded off the inside the post into the goalkeeper's arms. But I, of course, looking at the game through red and blue eyes, or claret and blue eyes, will say that we dug in well, we fought very hard. And once again, the two centre-backs were excellent and the goalkeeper played his part.
And I guess I can't stand here and ask you why you can't win a game without Wilfred Zaha in the team now.
No, that was nice, wasn't it? I've not really given that too much thought, to be perfectly honest, because it's one of those facts I get hit with. They mentioned 13 games, but I wasn't in charge for all of those 13 games. So, I know there have been games where he's not played and we've not won, but some of those games have been pretty tricky games, which I'm sure we'd have lost with him as well. So it's like all statistics, they tell a story, but if you really want to know what the story is, you've got to read the book. And we don't read the book for statistical stories, we just look at the statistics and then we draw our conclusions. But it was good to win without him, and basically we deserved to win without him because he didn't have the right to be sent off last week or get the yellow card that got him sent off, in the same way that James Tompkins didn't have the right to do that. And I've told them that, of course, and they accept that. But I'm really pleased that it didn't cost us again today, which it could well have done, because we have a good squad, but we don't have a squad that goes down enormously far. And when you lose players who've been playing all season, and players that most people would say these are two of Crystal Palace's better players, you don't want to be playing your home game without them.
Back-to-back home wins as well now.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's they'll be hitting me with new statistics at the next press conference. I just wait. Yeah, so I'll get Joanne organised here to get me all the stats that are going to come my way. But I still prefer to use statistics sparingly. I don't dismiss them, but I do think there's often very, very big stories behind the statistics, and if you're not careful, you latch on to one and think, oh, that means this. It's not normally quite as simple as that, so you have to look into a lot of facts.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Luka Milivojevic, Martin Kelly and James McArthur had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Leicester City. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Manchester City. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.